Wow, hello. If you know me, hi. This is probably very, very weird. If you don't know me, hi. I'm Raccoon, Deadeye Raccoon, DJ Raccoon. I'm a college radio host turned game design major turned video essayist. Now, I guess this is just my way of continuing to shout into the void endlessly. I've wanted to create long-form video content since I started editing down clips in Premiere a few months ago, and now I guess I'm finally getting around to it. I'm going to be graduating at the end of the year, and I'm a wildly inconsistent student, so I've been meaning to build my portfolio to give people a look into who I am, the types of games I play, and my thoughts on them. Hopefully, this will be accomplishing that. And to be entirely honest, this does fill a little hole in my heart that's been there since I was a kid, to really play the role of the YouTuber and sit in that seat. And what better way than to talk in depth about a game that I love oh so dearly, Destiny. There's been a lot of turmoil and controversy in the Destiny community over the past year or so, and that's not to say that there isn't always some amount of that going on, but it's been a lot more than usual. I'm by no means a game design expert. I don't even have my degree yet, but I've got probably close to 10,000 hours in the franchise at this point, so I'd like to think that with my background and my education, I have at least some idea of what I'm talking about, and I'd like to throw my hat in the ring here. I'm by no means a Destiny hater, but I also don't think I'm some Bungie shill either. They absolutely deserve their fair share of criticism, but as somebody who plays both PvE and PvP extensively, I'm a bit worried, but I haven't given up hope quite yet. I really wish that through making this video that somehow, some way, the ramblings and concerns in this script can resonate with somebody while also reassuring them. I also hope that people who haven't been involved with Destiny in any capacity could gain some knowledge of what it's like to be a member of this very tumultuous community, but I don't want to give those people the wrong idea. Destiny is a fantastic game, and it's made a permanent, positive impact on my life. I just don't want to fall into apathy like so many other players seem to be doing right now. Hi, I'm popping in after the fact a little bit here, off script, to apologize if there are some minor mic pops in this video. I use a headset without a pop filter, so that might come through. Apologies. The gameplay is going to be some pretty rusty Trials of Osiris footage, so, criticize my bad gameplay. I don't give a shit. And the video itself is going to have some imagery of some numbers and statistics at certain points in the video. So if you're watching, thank you.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Before I can even get into live service mumbo jumbo like seasonal models or cosmetic microtransactions or Lord Forgive pay-to-win mechanics, I should probably let the uninformed know what the hell Destiny even is and how it used to operate in the past. Destiny is an MMO, FPS, RPG. That stands for Massive Multiplayer Online First-Person Shooter Role-Playing Game. And it's developed by Bungie, the studio famous for Microsoft's Xbox-selling franchise, Halo. The first installment in the Destiny franchise, now referred to as Destiny 1, was released in 2014 to, you probably know, very lukewarm reception, yet grew a strangely loyal fan base, hopeful that the future would hold the promises that were given on the road to launch. Thankfully, the future wasn't as much of a pipe dream as many doubters had believed it to be. In the following year, Destiny would see its first major expansion, The Taken King. An expansion so good that it effectively saved the entire game. Destiny 1 would continue its lifespan with another expansion the following year, The Rise of Iron. Once again, Bungie's efforts were met with very positive reception. This isn't to say that times in D1 were perfect, by the way. The game had its fair share of issues with general lack of content, player versus player balancing, and a slew of other things I probably couldn't even think of despite putting in hundreds of hours myself. Yet, for a $60 game that would gradually decrease in price as expansions were rolled out and bundles made to accommodate new players, what you got on the tin was pretty remarkable when it was all said and done, especially compared to the state of the game at its launch. Of course, there was an actual all was said and done point. That's just how Destiny 1's story goes. You see, when Bungie separated from Microsoft in 2007, they couldn't just run it solo forever with no source of income. So in 2010, Bungie signed the infamous 10-year plan with Activision, which many players and onlookers have falsely come to believe was an actual, fully drawn and planned out version of Destiny that would span the game's launch to 10 years after. This is, as far as we can tell and as far as game development can tell us, hilariously false. In an interview with Games Radar before the Taken King's release, at the time marketing director Eric Osborne stated that any common perception of the 10-year plan was, quote, comical. I mean, when you sit on it for any decent amount of time, what he says is absolutely true. He also stated, quote, to think that somehow, before Destiny had shipped, we had a 10-year plan written down somewhere? We allowed the narrative to get constructed that Bungie is just a corporate entity and not a bunch of humans, a collection of people who were just trying to make a really great game. As someone who's worked on games, albeit mostly small student projects, games simply aren't planned out this deeply. It just doesn't happen. The market is too unpredictable, trends come and go, player feedback is given and taken. This holds true even more so for MMOs, games that are known for their ancient lifespans and peak trough content cycles. But how does some silly 10-year handshake relate to Destiny? Especially now. In 2017, Bungie revealed Destiny 2. No, Destiny wouldn't be like World of Warcraft or Guild Wars 2 before it. Rather, it would receive yet another boxed product. Player inventories would be wiped, planets ousted from the star map, and a brand new story told. There was no plan for this when Destiny came out, at least that Bungie was aware of. And so, whether we wanted it or not, we entered the era of Destiny 2.
And I'm thinking, I've got this. You know, when you're in that, you go, I got this. But man, I so did not have it.
Destiny 2's release was simultaneously much different, yet fundamentally the same as Destiny 1's. Instead of being immediately panned, the community saw a honeymoon period of rave reviews and general positive sentiment from players who'd been burned by the first game. Yet this would all inevitably collapse as hardcore players reached the endgame and realized that there really wasn't one. Destiny 2 was, for lack of a saying that would make me seem smarter, a mile wide and an inch deep. What followed in the coming year was the worst period in the franchise's history. A year of complete apathy towards Destiny. But right there at its launch, that was when it was at its absolute worst. In Bungie's now infamous GDC 2022 panel about developing a successful live service title, Chief Development Officer Justin Truman stated that if Destiny 2 continued to bleed players for 5 more weeks by the end of February 2018, the product would be effectively shuttered. This was what complete and utter player apathy had done to the game. People simply didn't care. Why should they have? All their weapons, armor, cosmetics, and content had either been replaced or flat out removed in the transition between titles, and the game as a whole had severely declined in quality and quantity. In a knee-jerk reaction, Bungie began to course correct, pushing patches to the live game that would alleviate player concerns in the now and prepare Destiny for a massive comeback in the future. This comeback came in the form of Forsaken, an expansion that returned Destiny to its former glory, bringing back old systems, introducing great new ones, and replacing the lighthearted and directionless story of vanilla with a mysterious and serious narrative about loss and hope. They even began to abandon the old content delivery model of 2 decently sized DLC packs during the year with a seasonal model, instead opting for 3 seasons of more drip-fed content to keep players engaged all year round. Bungie was riding high, but Activision seemingly wasn't too happy. In a quarterly earnings call, Activision threw Bungie under the bus, stating that they were disappointed with Forsaken's performance and that they would be exploring new avenues to monetize the franchise beyond major content drops. Destiny's game director at the time, Luke Smith, clapped back at their publisher, firmly stating, "We are not disappointed with Forsaken. We set out to build a game that Destiny players would love, and at Bungie, we love it too." Tensions were obviously high between the two companies, the outcome of such a disagreement completely uncertain. Fans wouldn't have to wait too long to see if anything came of Bungie and Activision's awkward public-facing relationship. On January 10th of 2019, Bungie dropped what felt like a nuclear bomb on the gaming landscape. They would be parting ways with Activision and its two sister studios, becoming a fully independent company, and publishing Destiny completely on their own. Practically every single fan rejoiced. Many saw Activision to be a malignant tumor upon the franchise's development, refusing to let Bungie pursue their own creative endeavors and sneaking predatory monetization methods into the game through the Eververse microtransaction storefront. The game would be moved away from ActiBlizz's launcher Battle.net and into the much more preferable Steam Marketplace. The golden age of Forsaken was still ongoing, and things were only looking up. Fast forward to now. We're in July of 2023, and the most vocal parties in the Destiny community are in a total uproar. Content creators are switching to variety content or outright quitting, and it feels like just about every other week our community experiences yet another controversy, usually related in some part to Bungie. Destiny is still self-published, but Bungie is owned by Sony, a company widely disliked for their refusal to cooperate with others, history of rampant console exclusivity, particularly in relation to Destiny, and strong grip on subsidiary studios. It rarely feels like the game is evolving, as we practically only see excruciatingly drip-fed content outside of expansion releases. Monetization is more aggressive than ever, with nearly a dozen ways of purchasing content within the Steam store page, and even more purchases hidden in-game. This is without even mentioning the plethora of microtransactions that continue to add to Bungie's pockets while limiting player customization and incentives. The story, after experiencing a golden age for a near 2-year period, is as uncertain and unclear as we remember it from a past we thought we could finally forget. So what the hell is going on?
Yes, I apologize for timing you out for 10 minutes in pre-stream, but let's talk about the context first. You asked me to play Destiny 2 PvP tomorrow. Do you think that is that a... Should I have timed you up for an hour?
Back in Season 10, Season of the Worthy, Bungie revealed that a long-awaited, long-beloved Crucible mode would be making its return, Trials of Osiris. For the unacquainted, Trials of Osiris is the most competitive environment that Destiny has to offer. A 3v3 round-based deathmatch encouraging the absolute best performance out of players, rewarding a perfect 7-0 golden ticket with exclusive flawless loot. A developer at Bungie stated that they really wanted to stick the landing with Trials. It's important that this doesn't go out half-baked. What followed was a complete catastrophe by just about every metric. The mode saw massive player drop-offs almost immediately following its launch, seeing population counts fall nearly 60% after just 10 weeks. Cheaters flooded the playlist, as the game was and still is free to play, and there were no official anti-cheat measures in place besides manual ban waves for over a year, with BattleEye finally being added in Season 15. This was far from the only colossal PvP blunder that Bungie has made in the meantime, though. Upon the release of the Shadowkeep expansion on October 1st, 2019, an entirely new map, Fragment, was added to the game. The first new map to be added to the Crucible following Fragment was Disjunction, added a whopping 9 seasons later on May 24th, 2022. That is a 966-day drought in PvP maps being added to the game. As of the time of writing this script, we still have yet to receive another new map since Disjunction, with the next planned for Season 22's release in a few weeks. While it's understandable that Bungie most likely has only a fraction of the devs working on PvP in comparison to PvE, I don't think it's controversial to say that such a map release cadence is unacceptable in a AAA live service title developed by a world-class studio. Then, in November of 2020, with the release of the Beyond Light expansion to Destiny 2, the first entirely new element was added. Stasis. That probably sends a shiver down the spine of any somewhat recent Destiny player, so, bear with me, guys. Along with Stasis, 3 subclasses were added entirely revolving around ice and corresponding status effects, such as slow and freeze, which were used very, very rarely before in the Destiny franchise. So, unsurprisingly, Stasis quickly ruined the entire balance of the Crucible. For months, practically the only viable subclasses were the Hunter Revenant, the Titan Behemoth, and the Warlock Shadebinder. Every single aspect of these kits was completely out of control. Hunters had access to Shatter Dive, which was an extremely low-effort one-shot combo that affected a massive area. Titans could skate around the map at consistently high speeds, basically not seen before in PvP, thanks to their new melee and their enhanced slide. And Warlocks could freeze people for up to 3 seconds in mid-range duels simply by using their Pocket Ice Wand. All of this goes without even mentioning the state that each class's supers launched in, which, for sake of brevity, were absolutely ridiculous. Although the kits did receive some minor balancing changes, it wasn't for weeks into the 3rd season of the year that Bungie would finally bring any nerfs actually substantial enough to haul the subclasses back in line with the other ones. It's not just subclass and ability balance either. Bungie has been famously slow with their gear balance as well, especially as of late. The current meta-defining SMG, the Immortal, has been on top of the primary weapon meta for over 4 months since its introduction in Trials Week 129 on the weekend of March 17th. It has since been in the top 2 weapons of every single weekend of Trials since then, with some weeks the gun even taking up both of the top 2 slots, considering that it has both an adept and a non-adept version. Even with nerfs to 750 RPM SMGs as a whole, the target lock perk, and the Immortal directly, usage rates of it haven't declined, no matter the map. Close range, mid-range, long range, it's still in the top 2. Cloud Strike, the PvP Sweat's sniper rifle of choice, has been slowly creeping up on a top dog meta slot since its introduction in Beyond Light, with its infinitely high skill cap, team wipe potential, and ability to kill players that the user can't even see. It snuck its way into the top 10 weapons in Trials during Week 127 on the weekend of February 17th. That weekend, on Endless Veil, which is arguably the best map in the game for that weapon, it saw 1.4% of the total kills. Just 2 weekends ago, at the time of writing this script, Week 140, on the weekend of July 7th, it saw 4.7% of the total kills on the map Midtown, taking up the 2nd slot just below the Immortal. It's extremely important to note that sniper rifles use special ammo and only start the round with limited ammo, specifically 2 rounds in the mag. Despite this, Cloud Strike is still consistently landing in the top 5 of weapons every single Trials week. According to Associate Weapons Designer at Bungie, BNG Mercules, Cloud Strike will be hit with a nerf to its explosion radius in Season 22. Whether or not this actually impacts its usage is yet to be seen. On a more personal note, Bungie, please, for the love of all that is good, nerf young Ahamkar's spine. I don't really have any numbers to back this one up, but please, just nerf it. Thank you. I have a little heart written in the script, so please. Objectivity and statistics can only go so far, though, as we only have so much from third-party sources like Trials Report, and I mean every player has different takes and experiences regarding PvP. By far, one of the most controversial design decisions that has been made within the past year was the decision to pivot away from a connection-based matchmaking system for much of the Crucible and replacing it with a skill-based matchmaking system. For the less acquainted, this essentially means that instead of prioritizing connections when forming teams, the matchmaker would favor making a more evenly skilled distribution of players across both sides. So, if someone just downloaded the game and wanted to try the shiny new purple Nightwatch scout rifle they got against other players, they would probably get a lobby with plenty of new players like themselves, or experienced players with poor performance in the Crucible. Likewise, a PvP sweat would probably face other PvP sweats. On paper, the system sounds much fairer, and seems like it would create a much more healthy PvP environment for everyone of all skill levels. No more getting stomped if you're not that good, and no more getting dead weight on your team if you're consistently top of the leaderboard. Unfortunately, as many top players predicted, this isn't how it's been going for practically a year now. As Destiny doesn't have amazing server quality, connections in top lobbies make matches nearly unplayable. Not only this, but as an above-average player, you're shoehorned into using very specific meta loadouts, cough, Immortal, in order to compete, or you'll risk getting completely rolled. While the experience is probably better for those in lower skill brackets, sure, players with the most time invested in PvP, those dedicated to improving, are effectively being punished for simply being better than other players? It's gotten to such a drastic point that content creators well known for their tempered personalities and off-meta leanings are leaving the game until things improve. Recently, veteran PvP creator True Vanguard and lesser-known wacky loadout darling TDT have begun to distance themselves from producing Destiny content due to just the general state of PvP. Even Grenader Jake, the single most watched Crucible Twitch streamer, has officially made the transition to variety content creation, completely fed up with the sandbox and rampant cheaters. If you're an avid Crucible player, I think I can adequately speak for most, if not all of you, when I say that it feels like Bungie isn't really listening anymore. And that's because I'm one of you. I say all of these things as someone who genuinely, at their very core, loves Destiny PvP. I mean that unapologetically. Make fun of me all you want. I don't care. I have over 1,200 hours in Destiny 2 PvP on PC alone, with dozens of flawless trials cards, consistently high KDA across all game modes, and tons of different loadouts that I love playing with, both meta and off meta. I've been even maining Berserker Titan for this entire year, despite its practical meme status in the subclass meta, simply because it's just so much fun to experiment with. I say all of this, by the way, not to flex my performance, but to show how committed I am to the entire PvP ecosystem. I truly do want what's best for every single player, as I know exactly what it's like to be new to this. I know what it's like to get stomped, and how bad and crushing of a feeling that can be. But to slowly see something I adore about this game continually getting worse for the players who care about it the most, the people who don't just hop in once a week to complete their Crucible bounties, it pains me deeply. To go from the acceptable state PvP was in about a year and a half ago with the 30th anniversary sandbox to this? Upsetting is putting it mildly. The Crucible has never, ever been perfect. Hell, rarely has it ever even been good. But the state it's in right now is doing nothing for community morale, and there are virtually no signs of it improving anytime soon. So you're probably wondering, since I have all the answers, what's been going on behind the scenes? What has changed within Bungie to warrant what feels like a complete turning of the back to the PvP community? Has Bungie lost their touch? Have they lost their minds? Is Dark Side Royalty Lord Joker, in all of his infinite stupidity and toxicity, actually right about Bungie hating its player base with a burning passion? Don't be silly. Of course not. The leading theory actually seems to be Now, to preface this section, I'm amped for Marathon. I'm pumped. Putting aside any delusional hopes for a Bloodborne PC port, Marathon is easily my most anticipated game on the horizon. The idea of a game in a genre plagued by a total lack of polish and any understanding of meaningful loot, led by some of Bungie's greatest development minds, just makes my heart race. I love the idea of extraction shooters, but no studio has been able to create one that's actually streamlined, has solid gunplay, purposeful gear, or appeals in any way to a more casual audience. Not only does Bungie clearly have the ability to pull all of these things off super well, but they're packaging it in a graphic realist, far future, hyper-capitalist, cyberpunk spacescape? I'm all in. No question about it. Something's been gnawing away at my excitement, though, and no doubt the same has been happening for a lot of other PvP players. What about Destiny? As of right now, there is no concrete evidence that Bungie has shifted development attention away from Destiny's Crucible and towards Marathon as a possible replacement, for lack of a better term. But you don't always need a signed piece of paper or a face-to-face interview or a random voice clip from a podcast to get a vague idea of what could possibly be going on. Understandably, several Bungie veterans have been placed on the Marathon team, it is confirmed, all at varying points of time. Some have switched over just recently, while others stopped working on Destiny years ago. Games, especially the type that Bungie makes, take an incredible amount of time and resources, so much so that your average gamer typically underestimates that amount substantially. Going off of Bungie's trademark history, developers' LinkedIn pages changing, Bungie job posting, etc., it's likely a relatively conservative guess to assume that Bungie's been working on Marathon for at least 5 years now. That goes all the way back to Forsaken era Destiny 2, even before the split, so to say that this is something recent and that Destiny PvP has been languishing specifically because of Marathon is kinda just wrong. Even though logically it just doesn't make a lot of sense, something about Marathon's announcement still stings. Accompanied by a Vidoc on the same day as its reveal, we can see hardened Bungie veterans excitedly discussing all of the possibilities that an entirely new game brings to the table. Veterans like Christopher Barrett, who's been at the studio since the 90s and worked as an art director on Destiny, and Steve Cotton, who worked on Halo 2 and 3's multiplayer. Seeing these familiar faces from our own games past, talking about the promise of another, specifically a PvP-focused game, is an odd experience. No doubt, the PvP side of Destiny's development has lost some amount of veteran talent as well, and while those spots will most likely be filled, training someone up to that former level of quality is by no means an instant process. So while there almost certainly wasn't a mass exodus like many people believe there to be, there must be some level of damage within the Destiny team. What stings a little bit more is that Marathon will see benefits that have either been completely ruled out of the question for Crucible or were added much too late. Benefits like dedicated servers, disconnect recovery, and fog of war. All of these features will ensure that Marathon is a much more secure and honest PvP experience, which is a bit sour considering the worsening connections and ever more rampant cheaters that continue to plague the Crucible. If Marathon can get these things, why can't we? The common belief is that Bungie is preparing for a full-scale transfer of players from Destiny to Marathon between its inevitable playtests, betas, and launch. If Marathon is going to be a significantly more enjoyable experience than what we're getting now, it would seem silly at first glance to decline them on that offer. After all, there might even be certain perks or benefits for being a dedicated Destiny player making the switch to Marathon. The thing is, though, we didn't particularly ask for this. While yes, I'm absolutely going to be playing the shit out of Marathon, and I have full faith it'll be a great game, possibly even a revolutionary one, that won't get the taste out of my mouth. Something feels morally off about a studio using the profit and trust of the community for one game, their only game, to then fund an entirely different game that is seemingly getting way more attention, designed from the bottom up to be the thing that we've wanted PvP to be for the past 9 years. Yes, I'll be playing Marathon, but I like the idea of extraction shooters. I played the beta for the finals, and I loved it. I've played the stress tests for Dark and Darker, and I loved those too. I'm absolutely within the target audience for this product, but your average Trials player who just wants their favorite playlist to receive a bit more tender loving care than they've been getting for the past year, there's no guarantee that they'll be as eager to press that download button. In fact, the exact opposite might happen. Some players have been flat out quitting not just Destiny, but Bungie games as a whole because they feel so burnt over the Marathon announcement. Again, is it a logical conclusion to make that Bungie just simply doesn't have any devs anymore on Crucible, that they're all on Marathon now? Absolutely not, since we're aware that there is at the very least something resembling a dedicated Crucible team at Bungie. That's just how the business works. Does Bungie just not care about Crucible at all, willing to let it wither away into a nothing playlist like Gambit? Again, no, as they still make and port maps for it, as well as adding new game modes and rewards every season. But regardless, does it still hurt to see what could have been? A little, and that's just me. It could be a lot for somebody else. I see you though. I'm sure by now you're completely sick of hearing terms like PvP and Crucible. If you play Destiny, chances are you're a PvE player. So let's talk a bit about that oh so good live service seasonal PvE game design.
Hold up, yeah. I can teach that bitch my language like Rosetta Stone. Yeah, for that bitch one time and then I'm phoning home. Yeah.
Destiny 2's seasonal model has undergone several different iterations since it was first introduced as the annual pass in 2018, and at this point is practically completely indistinguishable from what it once was. Forsaken's annual pass seasons had more content than a typical season does nowadays, with several entirely new raids being added throughout that year, as well as more large-scale activities like the Forges and the Menagerie. However, there were only 3 seasons that year, as opposed to the 4 we're now accustomed to receiving, as well as those seasons having the additional development might of Bungie's Activision-backed sister studios, Vicarious Visions and High Moon. To say what many people consider to be the golden days of Destiny's seasonal cadence should be the norm, or were without blemishes, would be lacking some very important context and require some pretty intense rose-tinted glasses. When Bungie went independent, the seasonal model shifted. So we'd get 4 seasons every year, with an additional fully fledged one launching alongside the yearly expansion. There'd also be a new and somewhat exciting progression path available, a season pass, or a battle pass as it's referred to in other games. Seasonal activities would still exist, albeit in a smaller capacity than what we were used to, and there would be no additional raid for the entire year of Shadowkeep. The first year of this new seasonal model was quite rough, to put it lightly. Season of the Undying was essentially just a singular, unshifting mission that received a slightly altered boss fight in the final few weeks. Season of Dawn was a bit better, as we got a decent seasonal activity in the form of the Sundial, as well as the first appearance of deep lore legend Saint 14, who we helped home through a brief collection of story missions. Season of the Worthy was, for all intents and purposes, a complete catastrophe. The only season from year 3 that is widely looked upon fondly by the community would be Arrivals. Although the seasonal activity wasn't anything crazy, it set up the next expansion's mood quite nicely and featured a fantastic dungeon to boot. By the end of year 4's first season, Season of the Hunt, players were getting pretty tired of the seasonal model. Activities had been mainly misses for well over a year, with the removal at the end of every season acting as extra salt on the wound, and the game's sandboxes were feeling particularly dry given the cycling out of much of the game's content after the original Destiny Content Vault sweep. Enter Season of the Chosen, and with it, the last fundamental shift of the seasonal release structure. The changes Chosen brought, while subtle, would lead to its near universal praise and the praise of several seasons following it. With Chosen, we not only experienced a very purposeful, well-told story about forgiveness and allegiances, but got tons and tons more content than every previous season since the split. To give a brief idea of what was included in Chosen, how does this sound? An entirely new strike, 3 new permanent battlegrounds, which are basically almost as good as your average strike, a phenomenal new secret mission heavily inspired by IP like Alien and Dead Space, which rewarded a genuinely great weapon, swaths of cool new weapons and perks from the loading up of the weapons team. The list goes on. We got all of this content, not just in a singular week, but spread out over 3 months. Almost every week had something new to return to, and coupled with additional progression in the form of seasonal challenges that could be hoarded and completed all in one go, there was less of this feeling of being forced to play Destiny. People just played because they wanted to play. The same was the case for Season of the Splicer after it, and Season of the Lost after Splicer, even Season of the Risen, which had the added pressure of launching alongside the Witch Queen, one of the best expansions in the franchise's history. For a while, we really thought that Bungie had it all figured out. Yet, all good things must come to an end. Ever since Risen, with the occasional outlier like Seraph, Destiny seasons have not been received particularly well by the community at large. Haunted misdirected its resources towards a lukewarm revival of an old location and its oversaturation of the crafted weapon economy. Plunder had way too many things going on, each of them lacking any real depth. Defiance suffered from a tonally confusing, weirdly told story, and now with Deep, Bungie seems to be making similar mistakes as it did with Plunder. I guess it's just something with water-based seasons? Regardless, there are some huge overarching issues that haven't been changing too much, as it seems Bungie may have been getting a bit complacent with the warm reception to this new model. The most notable of which is almost certainly the monotonous and predictable weekly release cycle that we've been going through for what feels like forever now, coupled with the overdevelopment of seasonal activities. Every week, for the first month and a half or so of a season, we log in, talk to some NPCs, and are told to do what usually makes up about an hour or so of seasonal activities. After that, you're pretty much done. The Iron Banner might be in town this week, or Grandmaster Nightfalls may have just launched, but you're pretty much done with your seasonal stuff. The issue here is that there's obviously loads of development time going into this weekly seasonal grind, if you even want to call it grind. Just this season, we have an entire storyline with some unique missions thrown in the mix, a seasonal menagerie-like activity in the form of salvage, and another seasonal activity with the miniature rogue-like deep dives. All of this content, while it will stay through the year, and some of it may even stay permanently, will only truly be relevant to players for these 3 months. Oh, and since I forgot to mention it, there's fishing too. This season, we didn't receive a single piece of truly new permanent content that will continue to be relevant through the seasonal activities or endgame activity status. No, the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon doesn't even technically count, since dungeons aren't included in seasonal purchases, no matter how closely they tie into the narrative. Everything that we got is temporary, fleeting, and will be irrelevant at some point in the future. And just by playing these activities, you can tell a massive amount of dev resources went into them, and it's just sad. The core playlists, those being Vanguard Ops, Crucible, and Gambit, cannot continue to languish so we can see yet another underwhelming menagerie-like or minigame added. Some good news on this front, though, is that in Game Director Joe Blackburn's yearly State of the Game post at the end of Year 5, he has confirmed that Season 23 will feature a focus on uplifting those same core playlists. We can only really hope that the result is actually fulfilling. Another glaring problem that has appeared with Seasons is the deluge of crafted weapons that come along with them, as each and every craftable weapon requires hours and hours of grinding, usually over several weeks, to acquire. Alongside this is the general refusal from Bungie to remove weapons from the sandbox, or the opposite, subtly implement forms of power creep to make new rewards more enticing. What we've been getting for a good while now are tons of new weapons every season, all from various different activities, with only a few of those worth going after. As weapons aren't ever cycled out or overshadowed with better ones, the weapons design team is slowly encountering a growing inability to create genuinely worthwhile gear and perks in the current sandbox. While the arsenals that came with Chosen, Splicer, and Risen were just begging to be min-maxed and experimented with, the same just isn't really the case anymore, especially as the weapons team begins to run out of elements to throw archetypes on. Those seasons had weapons like Palindrome, Salvager's Salvo, Chroma Rush, Ignition Code, and Peace of Mind. Staple weapons with interesting new perks like Chain Reaction, Heating Up, hell, we got Slide Shot on a fucking grenade launcher. But now, I couldn't really tell you a single weapon from this season that's worth grabbing a god roll for outside of Techian Force. What about last season? Again, not too much outside of Round Robin. An even more damning sign is that as Bungie functionally blacklists certain perks from appearing on new weapons, some players are even reverting to using old weapons that can roll with them. Want a usable auto rifle that actually benefits from kill clip? Sorry, you're going to have to go all the way back to Season 14 and dust off that Chroma Rush that may or may not be in your vault. Basically, the only weapons that make any splash in recent months have been outlier weapons with an insanely powerful new archetype or rare power creep perk, like Storm Chaser or Techian Force, or a weapon whose stats are so outrageous you'd be stupid not to use it, like Immortal or Round Robin. Most new weapons are kinda just mediocre, no matter the activity, and it feels like it's only really getting worse. Even when you consider the slew of issues that the seasonal model has brought to the game, it would be pretty childish to say that the entire thing is a complete objective failure. In Destiny 1, we basically had no additional content between major content releases, aside from the odd update or two here and there. In Destiny 2, we have content coming in all the time. It might not be a ton of content, and it might not be the best content, but it's content regardless. And despite dungeons not technically being a part of the season, the ones we've gotten have generally been received pretty well. Duality is a fun little romp inside Callus's brain. Spire is a really tightly designed, feverishly replayable infiltration fantasy that I love, and while I have my qualms with Ghosts, there's no denying its placement in the top spot of many people's dungeon tier lists. Hell, raids are even back too. Every year since the implementation of the Destiny Content Vault, Bungie has brought back a raid from Destiny's past, complete with its own world-first raid race and total redesign. That is genuinely super commendable. Running the reprised versions of Vault of Glass and King's Fall have been two of my favorite gaming experiences in recent memory. And what's even better, these raids have been totally 100% free. To stress test how free they actually were, considering encounter difficulty, I brought a friend completely new to the franchise along for a vault run, and we finished it with very few issues. So hats off to Bungie, these reduxes have been an instant staple. What sucks is how much everything else costs.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
On release, both Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 were $60 titles, and in the case of D1, after every expansion had been released, there was a bundled edition that contained every piece of content in the game at the same base asking price of $60. Destiny 2 couldn't have gone in a further direction. With the move to Steam, D2 would become free to play under a program called New Light. Anyone could download Destiny and have full, unrestricted access to the first year of content, including all campaigns, strikes, raids, everything. It was a great time to get into the game if you were a new player. No strings attached, no bullshit. You'd get to experience a sizable chunk of the story, along with all of the tutorials that paying players also got, and play an impressive amount of endgame content with plenty of raids to choose from. This was actually the time when I got one of my best groups of friends into the game, and while I will admit they had a pretty great teacher, it was a blast for everybody. Almost every single one of my friends liked the game so much that they bought Forsaken and Shadowkeep, as well as pre-ordered Beyond Light, committing to a day one Deepstone Crypt attempt. This model worked so well because it offered blueberries an on-ramp to the world, the gunplay, and the economies, while also providing ways for them to sink their teeth into what Destiny is really about. All of this changed when Bungie shuttered most of the content that was included in the New Light package with the DCV. For perspective, New Light players had access to all of vanilla Destiny 2, the Curse of Osiris DLC, and the Warmind DLC, which all contained their own unique campaigns and pieces of endgame content. Things like the Red War campaign, the Spire of Stars raid lair, the Savathûn Song Strike, and entire destinations like Io and Titan. All of these were free. The first wave of DCV removals was composed of all pieces of New Light content, with the few exceptions of the couple of destinations that stayed, their strikes, and any multiplayer maps that remained. After what was effectively a massacre of the entire free-to-play offering, all that remains for free players besides the occasional additional free raid are as follows. Limited access to playlist activities, access to a small collection of gear, access to previous free raids and dungeons, and access to destination free roam. All of the hallmarks of Destiny, like the campaigns, the gear grind, repetition of weekly pinnacle content, running high-level strikes, queuing competitive PvP, all of it isn't on offer. At most, your average New Light will get a few hours of aimlessly wandering around free roam spaces after the brief introductory quest, a couple of runs through strikes, and a match of Crucible if you're lucky. So clearly, with such a butchering of this system just a year after its debut, monetization would change elsewhere. Right? Wrong. Not only is Destiny extraordinarily hard to get into from a gameplay perspective, with its near infinite unexplained complexity, but it also costs an absolutely deranged amount of money, divvied up in ways that'll make your head spin. Let's say you want to start off with an old, outdated expansion, something simple. Despite most of it being removed, Forsaken is still being sold for $20 via the Forsaken Pack, a bundle that only includes gear from the expansion as well as access to its 2 endgame activities. Seems overpriced? What about Shadowkeep, which is about as irrelevant as a content release as you can get in current year? That's still going to run you $25, despite being nearly 4 years old and having some of the lowest quality gear and content in the game. Okay, you just want to be able to play the whole game. You think that the most you'll be paying for a full content offering in 2023 is $70, which is still pretty steep, but you're willing to fork it over. Sorry, buddy. You're way in over your head. At the time of writing the script, there still isn't a way to buy the full game in a single add-to-cart item. You'll actually need to make 3 large purchases. The Lightfall Annual Pass, which costs $100 and includes the latest expansion with the yearly seasons and dungeons. The Legacy Collection, which costs $60 and includes Witch Queen, Beyond Light, and Shadowkeep. And the OMORI Collection, which costs $30 and includes the Forsaken Pack and 30th Anniversary Pack. Whew, okay, you're finally done. Feel free to put away that credit card and oh my god.
Oh my goodness!
Yep, that's right, you're not quite done yet. Since you can no longer purchase the deluxe version of Witch Queen, every player who doesn't already own the Year 5 dungeons needs to cough up 2,000 silver and slap it right in Bungie's slimy left palm. How much is 2,000 silver, you might ask? Only another 20 Freedom Eagles. But what's that to you? You've already handed over 190 of them. Keep in mind that if you don't want to commit to buying Destiny 2's paid content in bundles, it's going to cost you even more than $210. Luckily, I've already done the math, and it actually equates to $265 if you buy everything piecemeal, including seasons. Oh, and if you enjoy the game and want to continue playing into the next year, you better set aside another $50 at the bare minimum. Obviously, getting into the game is too expensive. I don't think a single person would argue that, and if they did, I wouldn't really know what to say to them other than apologize to them. And to be clear, I'm perfectly fine with forking over a crisp Benjamin as a dedicated player who easily puts in hundreds upon hundreds of hours every single year. I want to support Bungie, and that asking price really isn't too much in the grand scheme of things. But when I see Bungie constantly talking about wanting to improve the new player experience, how the floor to learn the game is too high, etc., I want to lift my monitor up and scream really, really loudly at it. The new player experience in any video game is decided by 2 factors, not just one. Yes, there needs to be accessibility. Yes, there need to be adequate tutorials that fit the design ethos of the game. But what cannot be forgotten is the physical asking price of the title. We live in both an increasingly competitive gaming landscape and a decreasing late-stage capitalist economy. Games are becoming cheaper, many are entirely free. If you want to engage a new audience, one of the best, most consumer-friendly ways is to either charge a discounted price or make the game outright free. In conjunction with this, your average person is having to spend more and more money staying alive nowadays, buying food, paying rent, covering utilities, etc. For a now multi-billion-dollar company to be acting clueless and helpless to their game's horrible new player experience while the answer is staring them plainly in the face. It's just pathetic. Destiny has so much potential to be a genre-defining, industry-defining title. One of the last pieces it needs for that is a larger, more consistent stream of unfamiliar faces. To see that potential squandered so that Bungie can make a quick buck, if they don't want that level of success, that's on them. What's even more frustrating about the monetization is that it's only gotten worse since the free-to-play changes, substantially worse in fact. The price of the yearly expansion has been raised by $10, with seemingly no explanation as to why. The price of seasons have gone up to 1,200 silver due to inflation, a value that isn't even purchasable in any even denomination, and yearly dungeon passes have been added to the check, another $20 compared to many years prior. Seasonal events like The Dawning have been even further monetized, if that was even possible, with much of their progression awkwardly shoved into a 1,000 silver event pass. There seems to be no end in sight, with the only olive branch extended by Bungie being a short week of temporarily free expansions and a permanently free 30th anniversary pack being given out if players installed the game on Epic. These promotions were both done almost a year ago at this point, and nothing of the sort has been pushed out since, ignoring standard platform sales. There's even worse news for players who want to play across multiple platforms. Any purchase made with real money as opposed to silver aren't available to play cross-platform. So if you buy Lightfall on PC, but want to lay down on the couch and play on the sticks every once in a while, you're shit out of luck. Either buy the expansion on console, or play something else. So what can be done? Obviously, Bungie has some elite task force of number-crunching turbo nerds surveying and calculating the best possible monetary outcome for every individual piece of content in the game. That's just how big businesses work, even more so in a market as lucrative as AAA game development. If the prices aren't going to change because on paper they'll make money anyway, and the playlist activities won't get as much attention as needed because seasons are selling just fine right now as is, and the new player experience won't improve because free-to-play is apparently just doing its job, what is there to do? Doesn't this just seem hopeless? Well, what if it got so bad that people just didn't play?
Because you can fix your review scores, you can fix your sentiment, you can even fix your sales as long as you have engagement. As long as you have a community of players who care about and are passionate about your game. Even when that passion is being expressed as like anger or frustration. Anger, we eventually learn, like anger is not the opposite of loving a game. Anger is like 2 degrees off from loving a game, and they both come from passion, from people who are highly engaged with what you're making. And the opposite of loving a game, the thing that could kill you, is apathy. And that's so much more scary than anger.
I'm approaching the end of the script, and it's almost 2:30 in the morning when I'm writing this bit, so if you've stuck around for the whole glorified rant, thank you. I've been lacking the drive to do pretty much anything this summer, and my search for any employment opportunities, either in the game industry or something adjacent, haven't really been fruitful. To my surprise, this video, in spite of most of it being fairly negative, has been super fulfilling to me. This is still just a rough draft in comparison to what I ultimately wish it was, but I'm still proud of myself for just getting out there in literally any capacity. So thank you for listening if you have been. I appreciate it. Later this month, Bungie is going to reveal the first glimpse of the final shape, which will be the last expansion in the storytelling arc that Destiny has been on for the past 9 years. While some people are still misinformed and believe that Destiny is going to officially end with this expansion, that doesn't change the fact that the game must and will go on. Regardless of player feedback, regardless of content creators leaving, regardless of my own personal qualms, Destiny will continue. Bungie has said it time and time again. But right now, there's this unshakable feeling, you might have been feeling it too, that perhaps it actually is the end. Not in a literal sense, but in a metaphorical one. Our community is known for being angry. Endless Reddit threads about reskinned gear, YouTubers who have built small empires feasting on toxicity. Basically everyone who knows about Destiny knows that its community isn't a very calm one. But using Bungie's own logic, that's okay. Anger towards a live service game genuinely isn't a bad thing, as anger implies the existence of passion, and passion can be swung with a single opportunistic update. I do subscribe to this belief, by the way. I think that Bungie is absolutely correct here. Apathy, though, apathy is what kills a game. And 6 years ago, when Destiny 2 first released, that was when it was closest to dying. Back then, apathy thrived off the casualization of the game, the robotic destruction of years of our hard work. Now, apathy is slowly but surely festering inside many of us, once again, including myself. This time, I don't even know if I could pin it down on as few as 1 or 2 things causing me to lose hope. There are just so many. What I do know is that in just a couple of weeks, the Destiny hype cycle will begin anew, and thoughts like these might very well wash away. But beyond that, the outcome is entirely uncertain, and that's extremely worrying to me. I've been pretty harsh, pretty negative, but also pretty passionate in this video, which might lead some to question if I even practice what I've been preaching. The truth is, this is kind of my last straw. This is my last way of communicating my frustrations and my concerns before the news cycle starts to get crazy again. Over the past 2 months, I've barely logged on at all to play Destiny, as you've probably seen in the background footage from looking at my seasonal challenges. That footage is the only time I've logged on in the past God knows how long to actually play this game. No lie, a major reason I even wanted to make something like this was simply just to push me into completing my season pass because I wasn't confident enough that I would have the energy to do so otherwise. Basic weekly rituals for me that used to be commonplace, like raid runs, grandmasters, trials cards with my clanmates, all of those just seem so silly now. And it hasn't been only me. I've seen an alarming amount of people that I would see online all the time with thousands and thousands of hours like myself just no longer touching the game at all. Several of my closest friends have uninstalled the game entirely, and general sentiment within the space I play in has been growing more and more pessimistic by the day. That original friend group that I ran Deepstone with on day 1, the team that got into the game thanks to the old New Light system, none of them play anymore, and anytime Destiny is so much as brought up in conversation, it turns into a total vilification of Bungie. Those who still enjoy the game are trying their best to batten down the hatches, but the feeling is palpable. You can sense it in the air. You can only look at player numbers for so long, reassuring yourself that everything is fine before it inevitably starts to gnaw away at you. I don't want to be apathetic, though. This isn't a situation where I'm willingly being a huge downer, eager to make other people as miserable as myself. This is more therapeutic for me than anything because, man, I really want to play this game again. The friends I've made, the once-in-a-lifetime accomplishments, the addictive chaos of a late-night raid sesh with close buds, none of that would be possible without Destiny. Specifically, without Bungie's developers working behind the scenes these past 9 years. I want to say thank you to those people for everything they've done for me, even though I don't know any of their names or any of their faces and they don't know me. I really hope that if somehow, by some miracle, this manages to find its way to one of them, that they listen to it for what I have to say, just as a normal, everyday Destiny player. I want to love this game again. I want to feel that passion as much as I used to. Thanks for watching.